Hello and welcome to our first decade in review. We are reviewing the 10 years from 1300 to 1309, so let's get into it. 1300 started with us doing David and Deirdre's adult roles, which they both survived, and I was a little surprised because I expected both of them to die right off the bat. We then experienced our first fire on the lot. What a way to kick off the challenge, in my opinion, but thankfully no one got hurt. We did some chores and socializing throughout the year, and even sold some of our goods to try and increase our funds. Fergus started a period of frequent insecurity. It happened about 6 times this decade, but hey, who can blame him? His life as a peasant does mean hardship and worries constantly. We met our first family in Scotland, the Boyds, with all our teen Sims finding their potential partner extremely attractive, practically right from the get-go. Pretty intense, especially with all 3 letting us know the next day that they were hot daydreaming about them. In 1301, we experienced our first of many bathroom issues due to having one toilet, and unsurprisingly, this issue wasn't fixed when we got a second one. Grim visited to take our cow, we worked on skills, Fergus felt forlorn for a second time, we tried our hand at socializing again, and did chores. You know, the usual. The Fairbairns visited the church for the first time, but Deirdre looked worried to be there because she apparently wasn't of the same faith. Oh, and you guessed it, Fergus felt forlorn again. That was twice in 1 year. In 1302, we spent the year with Fergus, getting to know all the teen girls in the neighbourhood to see if he connected with any. He had a bit of a flirtation with Eden, but nothing more than that. He felt forlorn again, maybe because he was feeling the stress of finding a wife and he didn't know who to choose. So he met some more girls just to make the struggle even more real. Elsbeth specifically looked like she'd rather be anywhere else but in the conversation with Fergus. Beatrix met Hamish this year and they seemed to get along quite well, so there was hope for another match. In 1301, we did our first ever war roll, with David and Fergus both surviving and getting to sit that part of the conflict out. This year was Fergus's marriage year to either Eden, Archer or Clary, and because I couldn't decide who Fergus should marry, I rolled a die which meant he'd rolled to marry Clary. A bit unconventional for the challenge, but hey, we had to make moves. Fergus and Clary went on a date, and it seemed that they were quite compatible with each other. Everything was going smoothly until Fergus decided he'd die from hysteria. But all was well because I should have turned emotional deaths off, so he got a free pass to come back to life. That didn't stop everyone from being really emotional about it. Well, everyone but Katrina. Fergus even had to comfort Clary about the situation. Fergus's near-death experience really showed him how fragile life is, and it gave him the boost to propose to Clary. Katrina and Beatrix spent some time getting to know some potential male suitors, but ultimately weren't that impressed by the selection. At least going by their first impressions of each other. However, Thornfinn and Beatrix seemed to really like each other, so it was settled that they should get married. We desperately needed money before our wedding after having spent it all on wedding essentials, so we did a couple yard sales to get us by. And then it took them about 4 times to try and get married, with all their friends and family watching, before they gave up and eloped when everyone left, and so we ended the year hoping that our first baby was on the way. The goal in 1304 was to find Katrina a husband and get married, so we'd set off on socializing again. I wasn't too sure about Hamish, but Katrina did find him very attractive and interesting. Clary shared the big news that she was pregnant with Fergus, who was as excited as her. We spent some time pondering who Katrina should get married to, and then she spent some time with Alistair, who she found extremely attractive. However, their interactions weren't going too well, and Katrina seemed to have insulted him. And since I couldn't decide or wait, I rolled another die to make the decision for me. So Katrina was fated to marry Hendry, who she'd met in the first episode and had a major crush on. Another marriage meant we needed money for a dowry, so the Fairbairns worked on that whilst Katrina got to know Hendry better. However, she did let us know she was hot daydreaming about Alistair. Mixed signals, am I right? Considering she finds Hendry really attractive too. Nevertheless, those two got engaged and another wedding was on the way, thankfully less buggy than the first time around. We ended the year with Clary giving birth to her first child, little Maud, with both surviving their roles and successfully continuing the Fairbairn lineage, at least for now. 1305 started with the discovery that Beatrix found every single guy in town very unattractive. Maybe she was trying to say marriage wasn't really her style, but she was ultimately ignored by me as her fate was stated otherwise. As a result, Beatrix spent the better half of the year getting to know Thornfinn better, so they could hopefully have a good marriage, despite her finding him unattractive. And so we said that their marriage was for convenience rather than because of physical attraction, at least on her part. Maud aged up into an infant, and there was good vibes vibes all round, with Beatrix getting engaged and married, successfully ending 1305 with all our main households married and ready to continue the family line. We started 1306 with war rolls for all our male Sims in our main and side households, with David being the only one who was sent off. Katrina had already given birth to her first child, Christian, so we did their rolls and both mum and baby survived. The Fairbairns spent some time building their skills and Clary found out she was pregnant again. Robert the Bruce visited our yard sale even though he was supposed to be exiled, and then Beatrix came round for some sibling time and to let her mum know she was expecting. An unexpected fire happened whilst we were preparing to visit the Boyd family and made everybody incredibly tense, but Christian aged up to an infant and we got our first red-headed baby. Beatrix and Clary spent some time bonding with each other and sharing their pregnancy with each other. Beatrix gave birth to her first baby, Oscar. However, when the rolls happened, only mum survived and poor baby was whisked away as a result of being breech. At the start of 1307, Maud aged up into a toddler, successfully surviving her role. Clary gave birth to her second child, Margaret, who unfortunately died due to C-section complications, which were later re-rolled off camera to heart defect after a kind comment mentioned a C-section didn't make any sense. Fergus rolled a successful young adult age up, but everyone was sad, though that didn't really last long as they all seemingly forgot that Fergus and Clary had just lost a baby a few hours later. Katrina gave birth to her second child, Merida, and both baby and mum survived. Grim visited to take our cow on a holiday for the second time in the challenge, which makes me wonder how short their lifespans are. We finally aged Fergus up after forgetting about it for 2 days, and he got the perfectionist trait. Hendry also aged up into a young adult, and Clary started struggling to fall pregnant with another child, but she did age up safely into a young adult, followed by Thornfinn, who was also successful in his die roll. Merida aged up into an infant and defied my dreams of having a mini Merida from Brave by aging up with brown hair. We discovered, or really rediscovered, that Katrina has feelings for Alistair Clark and was hot daydreaming about him literal seconds after her second child aged up, sparking a discovery into the fact that neither Hendry nor Katrina had feelings for each other, or thought the other was good looking, despite previous interactions saying exactly that. To make matters worse, Katrina then showed that she thought Hendry's younger brother, John, was very attractive, but not him. However, we did start the next year finding out that Katrina was pregnant again. In 1308, Beatrix gave birth to her second child, Oswald, who survived, along with Beatrix, to see another day. David survived his war rolls and was able to come back home after fighting for 2 years. Back at the Boyd household, Christian successfully aged up into a toddler, ready to fill his home with chaos. And Katrina rolled a successful young adult roll-up. Eleanor Douglas, the lady of our land, visited the house. However, due to game problems, we jumped back in time, and that never happened. Maud and Clary spent some time together building skills, and we experienced another bout of time travel, causing us to lose 6 hours of chores to the abyss. At the McIntyre household, Oswald aged up into an infant, looking quite like his dad. At the Boyds, Katrina gave birth to her third child, Fiona, with both mum and baby surviving, giving the Boyd family the lead in surviving babies, if they were competing. And then, Katrina celebrated her birthday, leaving Beatrix as the only teen in the family tree for another year. We ended the year with Clary sharing the good news to Fergus that she was pregnant again. In the last year of the decade, we worked on building up our skills for the impending war rolls in 1310, hoping that hopefully no one is called because some people severely lack the necessary skills. This year, both Merida and Fiona aged up into toddler and infant respectively, successfully sharing their birthday. And as it turns out, Fiona is a little redhead, like her pop culture counterpart from Shrek, which I've only just realised. Beatrix gave birth to her third child, Maggie. Both mum and baby survived their roles, and Beatrix survived her young adult role, finishing the successful pattern with young adult age-ups. Clary also gave birth this year to a daughter named Agnes, who thankfully survived along with her mum. We learned that this baby was a crier and needed constant attention. And we ended the year with little Maud aging up into a child and surviving her roles, giving us our first child within the challenge and hopes for a successful continuation of the family tree. I thought it would be fun to check out our stats and family tree so far, even though it's only been 2 years, but I'm hoping it will be fun to compare and contrast throughout the challenge. So here we go. Okay, so this is what our Sims info section on the Google Docs for the Ultimate Decades Challenge looks like so far. We have our founders, David and Deirdre, at the top, and then we have our heir, Fergus, then Katrina and Beatrix, and obviously there are 3 families that have spread out from our marriages. We have the Fairbairn household with Clary and Fergus, with their daughters Maud, Margaret and Agnes, with Margaret being the only one who's passed away in 1307 as a baby with a heart defect. We move on to the Boyd family with Katrina and Henry and their kids Christian, Merida and Fiona, and all have survived. So we're doing quite well with that household. And then we have the McIntyre household with Thornfinn and Beatrix and their kids Oscar, Oswald and Maggie, with Oscar being the only one that's passed away in 1306 as a baby due to being breech. So those are our stats here. We've got 15 Sims alive, 2 deceased, and in total we've had 17. We have some fun diagram, like graph stats on this side. So we have had 10 females so far and 7 males. So the females are leading the data at this point. As I mentioned a couple seconds ago, we've only had 2 babies die, so far that's really the only thing that's showing up on our age of death chart. Unsurprisingly, all our Sims so far in the challenge are of Scottish nationality, but that will change at some point, I'm not sure when, but we will definitely expand. I have goals to expand to France and England at the moment, but to a potential Asian country at some point. I'm still working on the logistics behind the scenes of how I would make that work. We've got our founders in Generation 0, our heir and his siblings and all their spouses in Generation 1, and then all 9 children so far are in Generation 2, and obviously that'll continue to grow throughout the next decade. And I think I'll just go over and show you our family tree that I've also created. So over here we have our family with our founder David and Deirdre, and then Fergus and Clary who've had Maud, Margaret and Agnes, Henry and Katrina who've had Christian, Merida and Fiona, and then Thornfinn and Beatrix who've had Oscar, Oswald and Maggie, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. So these are our 17 Sims, 15 minus the 2 that have passed away. So that's how our tree is looking, and I'm really excited to compare this in another 10 years in game to see how our family tree and our stats bloom. So I hope you've found this decade in review interesting, helpful for remembering bits and bobs that happened throughout the last 10 years for our Sims, and I will see you in the next video when we start the new decade, 1310. Bye!